New York, 1 month after the Deepwater Horizon oil rig sank into the Gulf of Mexico, environmental scientists testified to Congress that the use of dispersants, the chemicals that break up oil on the surface and underwater, does nothing except reduce the oil's visibility. In other words, it doesn't clean pollution, it just hides evidence. In our fifth story tonight, 81 days in, with BP still using dispersants, the first glimmer of the price that will be paid. 20%. 1 out of 5 cleanup workers working offshore have been exposed to potentially hazardous levels of a toxic chemical found in those dispersants. Almost immediately, BP began using dispersants that were more toxic than others approved for this use. Dispersants it bought from a company with ties to Exxon and BP. Dispersants it used even after the EPA told it not to. Even after environmentalists testified to Congress that dispersants make it harder to remove the oil from the water and seem to serve primarily to hide it from the public.
It would seem that you would want it as thick and as concentrated as possible to deal with it right there, instead of circling it with numerous booms that are made for ocean wave conditions. We seem to be saying we're going to take this concentrated oil, we're going to dissolve it. So we have no ability to touch it or deal with it. For the most part, we won't see it. It's an out-of-sight, out-of-mind strategy only. It's a PR stunt to dissolve this oil with dispersants. It's just to get it away from the cameras on the shoreline.
But yet, something even more dangerous might be taking place under the ocean.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're saying?
BP has poured hundreds of thousands of gallons of it into the Gulf, not only by air, but underwater. That, a process not only unprecedented, but untested. Now, Greenwire reports that BP has released monitoring data from as recently as June 29th, results of testing its cleanup work. And finding that 20% of offshore workers and 15% of nearshore workers had 10 parts per million of the dispersant solvent called 2-butoxyethanol, twice the toxicity limit of 5 parts per million dictated by the CDC's National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety. More than 47,000 people are working to clean up the spill right now, and because one way to get exposed to 2-butoxyethanol is to breathe it, a new coalition of environmental and fishing groups has launched a site called BPMakesMeSick.com, petitioning President Obama to make BP give the workers respirators. The effort to stop rather than to conceal the spill could take a major step forward this weekend. BP is hoping to attach a tighter containment cap to the spill by Monday morning. Though the oil will flow unimpeded after the current cap is removed earlier than that, and bring a new vessel as well, the Helix Producer, collecting from a different part of the leak starting Sunday. And if all that fails, possibly funnel the oil for miles along the seafloor to other wells. The political fallout also continuing unimpeded. Democrats, the DNC, launching a website of their own targeting what have the...
You may think twice after seeing this report. It's a News 5 investigation testing the waters. We want to get a sample just over here where there are people actually in the water. Our News 5 investigation took us from Gulf Shores to Orange Beach, to Katrina Key, to the Dolphin Island Marina. We collected samples of water, sand, and when we saw kids digging... Do you mind if we get some water out of your sand hole here? We got a sample of that, too. To our eye, the water looked pretty normal until we took those samples to a lab. When testing for oil or grease, how much would be normal on the beach?
I wouldn't think that you'd find very much on the beach. There's no real normal amount. Normal is non-detected.
Bob Naiman is a chemist with nearly 30 years of experience. He tested our water and sand for oil and petroleum. Naiman says he wouldn't expect to see any more than 5 parts per million of the greasy stuff. But when he started testing the water, this is what he found. The first sample, taken just off Katrina Key, tested positive for more than 3 times that, 16 parts per million of oil and petroleum. The second sample was water from Orange Beach. Here we saw light sheen, and the test confirmed, coming back with 29 parts per million. In Gulf Shores, we came across some kids digging in the sand, some 20 yards from any waves.
You mind if I get a sample of your water?
But even there, the sample came back 51 parts per million. The numbers keep getting higher. Gulf Shores beach water, right where people were swimming, showed 66 parts per million. And the sand, where beachgoers are walking, has 211 parts per million. The sixth sample was a spot in Orange Beach where, again, we found kids playing. And we found our highest content of oil and petroleum, 221 parts per million. But the tests didn't stop there. The sample we haven't yet told you about is the one collected from Dolphin Island Marina near some boom, which we can only imagine's been handled by cleanup workers. When Naaman added an organic solvent to separate the oil from the water, just like he did with all the other samples, this sample exploded right in his lab.
I mean, like almost instantaneous. Actually, maybe 1 second. It's just weird.
The results surprised even our chemist.
We think that it most likely happened due to the presence of either methanol or methane gas or the presence of the dispersant Corexit.
There are two things that we can take away from the test we did. First, even if you don't see oil on the beach or in the water, chances are it's there. All of our tests from Orange Beach to